Often when I look at portrait photography these days, I'm a little bit baffled. I do tend to see that a lot of people don't understand what a portrait is. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, if you look on Instagram, you can see some fantastic portrait photographers, and they do brilliant work. But there are a lot of portraits on there which are not portraits. They're more like fashion shots, or they are fantasy shots, which is something that is what baffles me. You see people dressed up in costumes that has nothing whatsoever to do with the subject. It doesn't depict them as a person, and it has nothing to do with their life. It's as if they're actors and they're being photographed as being a totally different person as to who they really are. And this I find just a little bit strange. Why do people think that that is a portrait? A portrait depicts the person. Now, firstly, there is no psychology in photography as there is in painting or anything else. Any visual work can't pick up people's psychology. But what we do is with facial mimic, with gestures, with body language, and with some really nice lighting, we try and depict who that person really is. When I do a portrait, I always try my best to actually discover the nobility in the person, because if you can get a person to sit down in a way that it expresses through body language and the way they look, something about their more noble side as a human being, that humanness, you will also start to see self-respect come through. You'll also see maybe even a bit of shyness comes through, because they're showing a side of themselves that is real and it is who they are, and it might be a bit deeper. But most of us, we go out into the world each day and we hide who we are. We have a persona. But when we sit down in front of a camera, it's a tough job, but a good portrait photographer should be able to do their best to actually bring the person out and get that shot. What I tend to do is, if I meet a person and we're going to do a portrait shot, I do want to know something about them. I would never actually walk in and say, okay, I'm going to set up and I want you to sit there, and then I get the lighting and I do the lighting how I want it, and then I take a shot and then that's it, and then I say wham bam, thank you ma'am, put the money in my bank. I don't think that's portrait photography either. For a headshot might be okay, but portrait as in creative artistic work. A portrait should firstly be honest, and that's tough. To be honest is don't dress up and don't put makeup all over your face like you're going to the circus or something like that, I mean, what's the point of covering your face so much that you can't even see who you are? I read something once which impressed me, and I thought it was a good observation, and that is that human beings are the only animal on this planet who are always aspiring to be anything but a human being, always trying to be something else. And when you think about it, there's a lot of truth to that, because we do tend to, all of us, we all tend to sort of associate ourselves or identify with something better than what we are. Some of us might, some men might say I'm a tiger, some women a tigress or a tiger, or people like to consider themselves maybe a bit mousy and shy and things like this. And we're never just trying to figure out for ourselves, what is that really in human terms? We don't tend to just accept ourselves as human beings and present ourselves in that way. And it's no doubt really in the world that we live in, society that we live in is highly competitive. And of course, we've got to show our tough side all the time, which is what tends to take us away from our real person. And so a portrait photographer is going to have to take time with the subject and maybe have a cup of coffee and a chat and things like this, find out what they've done in the past, what their aspirations in life are to do, or what they have done. This helps a lot to build up a stronger picture of who that person is. And that way, you find that somehow when you're setting up, when you're getting the person ready for a portrait, it tends to come out more, but it also relaxes them, because they see you know something about them and it's okay. They feel more relaxed about it. And then trying to get that sense of dignity into the photo, which is what I mean when I talk about nobility in a person, is that human beings can be very noble people. They can be full of self-respect, one of the most important things that we can have. You might meet a person and they are generally proud, you know, for good or bad. But if they're that way, well, that's probably what should be brought out in the photo. I mean, I've known people who know that they are over proud, and so they're a little bit arrogant and they giggle about it. But I would photograph them that way because they would remember themselves in that way. Years ago, I was a painter, an oil painter, and I did, in the 90s, I decided that it might be a good idea if I make some money by portrait painting, which was quite popular in Berlin at that time. I don't know about these days because it's been a long time since I was involved in the art world of painting. And the thing I did, I never came across a person who ever once thought that it would be a good idea to dress up and be somebody different for a portrait painting. It was always about them. The thing about painting and photography is quite different actually when you do a portrait in oil and a portrait with a photograph. It's two different mediums. You know, the painter is going to really go for that coldness in the person and that you know, skin tones and things like this, and work with dark shadows and, you know, bring out a little bit of the rosiness in the cheeks in a way that might not be so flattering. You know, that's another thing about portrait photography and painting, that you know, how much would you flatter a person? You know, is that important? Or would it be better if you know, really went for that you know, solid portrait of who they really are? And the truth is, I'm sure you agree with me, if you've ever done portrait photography, that sometimes you think it's a great shot because you've got the artistic streak in you, but then you discover that they don't like it because it shows them too much like they really are, an ordinary human being. And that's what I mean about try and encourage them to show self-respect through body language, show a bit of humour maybe in their face if they're that type of person, to be able to show that nobility of humanness. And I mean, it is what we're trying to achieve when we do a portrait, is to be able to get the best side of the person. And of course that can tip over into flattery when we start, you know, making them look like somebody they're not. You know, whatever the style of the portrait, it doesn't matter, in your own style. I'm sure that's the reason why the person chose you to do their portrait, but it should really have a feeling and a strength in it that comes through clarity and realism. And being honest, and these are the things that go towards those emotions of honesty, is the reality and clarity of and clarity, I mean, you really see the person for who they are, and maybe encourage them to stop thinking about fantasy ideas of themselves. We can achieve these things through, you know, facial mimic, gestures and body language. And if we have got to know the person a little bit, we might be able to suggest ideas about body language. That helps a lot. You know, if you look at the work of famous photographers who've done portraits, you know, some of them are really good, amazing, and you could sit and look at those photos for a long time. Something I do, and I find it very, very relaxing, enjoyable, and also educational. I think deeply about, you know, how they got the light tones and whether the shadows are harsh or hard edges, or whether they're very soft and easygoing. You know, if you look at, say, Leibovitz or Leibovitz or something, I don't know, Annie Leibovitz, the Rolling Stone photographer, you know, she got into doing a hell of a lot of portraits, and she did these big group portraits, which I believe were done through compositing the photos, taking a photo of each person individually and then placing them into the composition. They came out really well, but it's exactly the same concept each time. And they're lovely photos, but personally I don't think that they have a lot to do with the person. They are maybe a historical record of the person, but whether it's really a portrait of an individual or not, I don't really know. I wouldn't say. I don't see much difference in many of her photos of those portraits. But she's a great photographer, but she's a popular photographer. I think that if you look on Instagram and you see the photos that I said that baffle me a bit when people say they're portraits, very often there's some sort of, this situation in Instagram where people did an awful lot of selfies. And a selfie is something spontaneous. It's phenomena of our era that we live in. These people, they want to constantly click, 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 take photos of themselves, whatever they're doing. And it's not really a self-portrait. It is really a snapshot of themselves walking along the street or walking through a doorway or being in a particular place. And there's always some sort of self-mockery involved in it. And I don't know whether people realise that or not, but I wouldn't want to go around and just have dozens and dozens or hundreds of selfies on the internet of me mocking myself. I wouldn't feel happy about that whatsoever. Don't know about what you think. I imagine that most people would agree and think, what's the point of that? And I think it's part of the reason why people find selfies to be a little bit daft. There are many ways to set up a portrait set. I always seem to like a single light or two lights. I've never really found it of much value to me because I do like the moody portrait. I like shadow. I like a nice dark background. Not to say that lots of light is a bad thing, but I just like it probably because I come from the painting really originally, and I like these lovely shadows that support the light. And so one big light tends to be great, and I can sort of model it by moving the light around very, very gently and just a little bit at a time. If I want to illuminate the face even more and make it very bright, then I'll get a second light and I'll bring it in, and I'll be able to then put that onto the face and adjust it strength so I get it just right. Not much into getting sparkles in the eyes and making it look cartoony or anything. I think it's it's enough if you get the colour of the eyes through the light, and that's plenty, and then get just a little bit of a highlight in the eye. But otherwise, two lights is plenty for me. The third light, I've got to be honest, I start just thinking, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Maybe I'd have a third light if the hands became very important. So hands can indeed be very expressive. So, if you have a portrait with hands, very important not to allow the sitter, to just flop their hands around or stick them in the wrong place. Especially hidden hands don't look very nice at all, because it just creates a confusing idea as if it's again, a snapshot or something and they were about to move. It's always good to have hands in a position that are resting and relaxed, because hands can express tension or look weird when they're twisted. If somebody holding their fingers like that. I have a bad habit of doing this, and if I've seen a photo of myself doing that, I always think, what the hell am I doing? Holding my fingers like this. It looks rather daft, actually, but it's a weird thing. There you go. But you don't want to take photos of people doing things like that. This sort of position, that's a nice portrait idea. Using the hands around the face can be a good idea, and I do like that, as long as it doesn't cover the face too much, unless the person is possibly an actor or something like that, and therefore sort of theatrical gestures are probably a big part of their life, and they know what they're doing and they'll show you what works. Every photo, including portraits, is an experiment. So it's always good to approach each one with a renewed spirit of energy and the hope that it's going to turn out to be better than yesterday's photo, and that's the way we should work. We can learn from other photographers in all aspects of photography, from street photography, portrait photography, and through to all types of general photography. We can learn from others, but it's not a good idea to try and level up to them somehow, because that's the sort of competition that just puts you in the disadvantage all the time, because you are immediately putting yourself behind people and chasing them. It's much better to approach each project of photography by looking at what you've done in the past and then attempting to supersede that with your efforts today. That's what I do. I tend to find it works, and it's a good way to live your life too, I think. That was my cat, and he's telling me it's about the time I finish the video. So, all right, kid. Murphy boy, get out of the way. So, it's great to see anybody watching, and if you like the video, I don't think anybody wants to see your backside, kid. Go on. That's it. You just settle down there. So, so it would be great if somebody subscribed. If you like it, all the best for the rest of this weekend. It's Saturday night, Sunday tomorrow. Take it easy. Don't push it too hard. I'm Sean Durham in Berlin. Good night. You nutter.